Welcome back. I'm Gala. It's time for some stories after dark. In April 2008, Hong Kong was seized by a fear it had no name for. At the wet markets, the queues at the pork stalls grew long and quiet. People no longer reached for soup bones without looking. They turned each one over. They studied it. They lowered their voices. I heard a girl's bones were mixed in with the pork. We've been eating this for days. Is it safe? Overnight, the city convinced itself it had been made into a cannibal. The news ran on a loop. The front pages did not flinch. Dismembered girls' bones mixed with pork and sold. The source of the panic was a 17-year-old from Hunan. Her name was Wong Ka Mei. She had been a bright student once, ambitious, full of plans. She came to Hong Kong, the Pearl of the Orient, with hope in her chest. No one imagined her short life would end as one of the most brutal dismemberment cases in the city's history. Years later, it became the basis for the award-winning film, Port of Call. The film made certain this chapter would never leave Hong Kong's memory. Now, if you're ready, close your eyes and let us return to that quiet Sunday in April 2008, before everything changed. Wong Ka Mei was born in 1991 on the banks of the Shang River in Hunan. Hunan is called the land of hibiscus. It is a place of poetry and hard beauty. The cut peaks of Zhangjiajie, the cloud that never leaves Mount Heng, the wide silence of Dongting Lake. The Shang River runs through it like a silver thread, edged with low hills and green rice. She grew up in an ordinary family. The air of her childhood carried chili, wet earth, tea oil, and the smoke of evening cooking. Her name held the character Mei, plum blossom. In Hunanese culture, the plum is one of the four gentlemen. It stands for resilience. It blooms in the hardest winter, alone, and releases its fragrance into the cold without being asked. Her parents chose the name as a blessing. They wanted a daughter who was graceful on the surface and unbreakable beneath it. For people in Hunan, Hong Kong was a far and shining thing, a world city, towers and light. It stood for money, for chance, for a life better than the one you were born into. Mei was 4 when her mother remarried a Hong Kong man. To a child, it must have looked like a door opening. Her mother took both daughters across the border with the same belief everyone carried, that the city would be kinder to them than the village had been. She was 14 when she finally arrived. At first, there was excitement. She entered a respected secondary school and won scholarships twice on her own effort. But she was strong-willed and made of edges. She did not fold easily into a group. She drifted from her classmates and turned instead to the internet, where she made friends, older boys mostly. The city that had shone in her imagination did not deliver. Reality is rarely interested in what we imagined. Her elderly stepfather had lost the ability to work, and the household tightened around its own tension. To hold it together, Her mother left before dawn each morning and pushed a worn handcart through the quiet streets near their home, collecting cardboard. She gathered boxes from shop fronts and gutters. She flattened them. She pushed them to the recycling depot for a few coins. Enough, on a good day, for a single meal. Bent under the weight, her thin frame threw a long shadow in the evening light. When it rained, she did not stop. The cardboard cut her hands. The blood ran with the rain. This is the part the documents record plainly, and the part that does the most damage. Every time Mei came home and saw those hands, swollen, blackened, still arranging themselves into a smile for her, something turned in her chest. She would shut her door and cry where her mother could not hear. I can't let her live like this. The guilt went in like a thorn and stayed. By her 3rd year of school, she made the decision that decided everything else. She dropped out. I want to work, she told them. I want to help. I don't want Mum to suffer anymore. A girl who should have been blooming stepped early into a world that had no use for plum blossoms. She took small jobs, cashier at a fast food counter. The money covered almost nothing. She turned to modeling, hoping for more. An agency took her instead, a scam dressed as opportunity, and left her owing roughly $65,000 in audition fees. The debt grew. The collectors did not soften. At her lowest, she found 3 Lunch, an adult forum that circulated among the young at the time. Its romance section was busy. This is where she met the word that would receive her, Wungao, Enjo Kosai. The word was an import. It came from Japan from the 1990s, where Enjo Kosai described an arrangement. Schoolgirls accepting money from older men in exchange for company, time, conversation, a meal. Sex sometimes, but not always, and never named when it was. The vagueness was the design. Wun means aid. Gao means to associate. Put together, the phrase says only assisted company. It does not say what is being assisted or with what. Hong Kong took the word whole. By the time Mei found it, Wungao had its own quiet currency in the chat rooms, a 2-character phrase a girl could say to herself in place of the harder ones. This is what the euphemism is for. It lowers the threshold. A girl does not have to believe she is selling anything. She believes she is having dinner with a man who will help with the rent. The word supplies the story before she has to write it herself. Only temporary, only company, only help. It makes the first step small enough to take. It says nothing about the second. She registered under the name Kimi. She uploaded a few photographs. She set a price, $200 to $400 a session. The girl named for the flower that survives winter, the teenager who lay awake over her mother's hands. Kimi, selling her body to strangers in the dark of a forum. She believed it was temporary, a small sacrifice, enough to ease her mother, to settle the house. The word had let her walk in. It would not show her the way back out. Under the name Kimi, Mei began her short trade on 3 Lunch. The plan was simple. Clear the debt, help at home, stop. In a few months, she had met several clients. The guilt arrived after each one, reliable as nausea. But her mother's face looked less strained now, and so she repeated the sentence that keeps people in places they should leave. This is temporary. When the debt is gone, I'll stop. Sunday, April 27th, 2008. An ordinary day. A message arrived on 3 lunch. The sender called himself Fat Ding. His name was Ding Kai Tai, 24, near 100 kilograms, unemployed, living alone in a subdivided room inside an old tenement. The injuries came early. A traffic accident took his mother when he was a child. The same accident took something from him, a head injury, and the learning difficulties that followed it. 2 losses in one event, though only one of them had a funeral. The classroom moved at a speed he could not match. Each year, the distance between him and the other children lengthened until it stopped being distance and became a wall. Children are precise in their cruelty toward the one who cannot keep pace. They administer it without malice and without pause, which is worse than malice. So he did what the unsupported child always does. He went inward, toward the quieter room, and he closed the door behind him. As an adult, Ding filled the silence with ice, ketamine, ecstasy. The names matter less than the function. Each was a way of purchasing, briefly, the absence of himself. He was a regular on 3 lunch, where a man who could not connect could buy the appearance of connection by the hour. The platform did not invent his isolation. It monetized it. He lived at the margin, in the part of the city that exists to absorb the people the rest of it has no use for. His own father, later, was asked to describe him. He did not reach for the word monster. He reached for something smaller and far harder to bear. A man who would not step on a cockroach. Hold that detail. It is the whole difficulty of the case in a single image. The instinct underneath was not toward harm. It was toward sparing even the lowest thing alive. But gentleness, left unsupported and steeped in years of chemicals and an injury that never healed, does not stay gentle. It becomes unstable. It learns to turn, without warning, into its opposite. The capacity to spare and the capacity to destroy turn out to draw from the same shallow well. This is the part that resists the story we would prefer. The record does not hand us a monster. A monster would be a relief, because a monster is a category we can stand outside of. It hands us a damaged man and a desperate girl, and the quiet machinery that delivered them both into the same 40 square feet. Neither chose the room. The city arranged it. He offered $300 to meet that afternoon. She hesitated over his profile. Then she agreed. To her, it was a transaction, one among many, no different in kind from the rest. That afternoon, she told her family she was meeting friends for shopping. A small, ordinary lie, the kind that costs nothing and is soon forgotten by the one who tells it. It was the last time she walked out the door. That afternoon, Mei reached a tenement in Kowloon. It dated from the late 1960s. The facade had been a pale color once. Age had taken that, leaving it faded and stained. Air conditioning units protruded from nearly every window, and laundry hung from the balconies, moving a little in the warm afternoon air. The ordinary banners of lives lived in too little space. At street level, the shops held the ground floor, their signs glowing faintly beneath the lamps. The entrance was narrow and gave no sign of itself. She went in and took the old lift to the second floor. The doors opened onto a corridor that ran long and poorly lit ahead of her. Water had stained the walls. The air sat heavy and unmoving. Behind the thin doors on either side came the muffled record of daily life. Televisions, voices, now and then an argument. As in so many buildings here, the original flats had long since been divided into single rented rooms. Flat 2C was at the end. Ding opened the door. His body nearly filled the frame so completely that the room behind him appeared only in fragments. The air came out before he did. Heat, sweat, mold, old smoke. The room was barely 40 square feet. No window, one yellow bulb, too dim to reach the corners. The floor had disappeared beneath takeaway boxes, cans, cigarette ends, clothes left where they fell. A stained single bed held most of the room. Beside it, a computer left open on the forum. This was where he lived. Dark, sealed, alone. They sat on the bed and talked, as the routine required. He was in a good mood. He took white powder and pills from a drawer, ketamine, ice, ecstasy, and grinned. Let's get high. It feels better. She did not want to. She did it anyway. The drugs came on and the air thickened. Breathing became a thing one had to attend to. He played music she liked. He moved closer. His breath was heavy and carried smoke and drink. His hands found her skin. He kept wiping his forehead. The heat rose. The smell rose with it. His movements turned rough. His breathing turned ragged. Under the yellow light, his face went slack and strange, and something passed behind his eyes that the record can only call unreadable. On the surface, an ordinary appointment, one transaction among the city's countless transactions that evening. No one knew that from this point, nothing was under control. In that small, dark room, Mei had reached the last stage of her life. The drugs and the music were still in the room. During the act, the drugs lifted him into something else. He closed both hands around her neck. She thought at first that it was roughness, and she did not fight. The grip tightened. It did not stop. She weighed 40 kilograms. She had no strength to give. Her body convulsed. Then the room went quiet. She lay still on the bed. He thought she had fallen asleep. He reached over and shook her and found that she was already cold, with blood at the corner of her mouth. She was dead. He did not break. Something colder than panic settled over him instead. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the ceiling. No one can know I did this. If I'm caught, I'm finished. This has to disappear. He decided to do what the pork stalls downstairs did to meat, systematically. What followed took 8 hours, 6 for the dismemberment, 2 for the disposal, from afternoon into the night. It was not a frenzy. There was no rage in it. He dragged the body into the small bathroom and worked with focus, repeating a sentence to keep himself steady. As long as I clean it, no one will find out. He drained, then separated, then disposed, moving soft tissue through the toilet piece by piece. The metallic smell joined the mold and the sweat already in the air. At one point, he felt that her eyes were still on him. He could not concentrate. "I don't want to see your face anymore," he said, and he removed it. He stayed methodical the whole way through. While he worked, he played music on the computer. Police records later showed that one of the tracks was Darude's Sandstorm. He wiped his forehead between movements. The pace was slow and disturbingly calm. This is the detail that should not leave you. Not the knife, the music. A man building a soundtrack for the dismantling of a person, as though the night needed accompaniment. That is where the case stops being about violence and becomes about something worse. The human capacity to make the unbearable ordinary, one task at a time. By late evening, it was nearly done. He packed the head and part of the torso into a styrofoam box and weighted it with bricks. The limb bones he packed separately to be carried to the market. Around 10 o'clock, he took the bus toward the sea near Kowloon City Ferry Pier, carrying the box. He pushed it into the dark water and felt, for the first time, relief. It should be over now. The limb bones he brought to the wet market near his flat in 2 trips and folded quietly into the piles of pork bone. Some of those bones were bought the next morning by people on their way home to make soup. A compensated dating appointment had become one of the most brutal dismemberment cases in the city's history. Mei had vanished from the city she once approached with hope. Two days after she disappeared, her family went to the police. In Hong Kong, when someone goes missing, the police do not always move quickly. Thousands are reported each year. Most return on their own. A quarrel cooled, a debt outrun, a few days that needed to be spent elsewhere. The system has learned this, and the learning has made it patient. Cases are sorted by risk. A young girl with no history of running away should, in theory, trigger concern. But even then, the system moves slowly at first. There are hospitals to check, mortuaries to call, immigration records to search, and CCTV footage to review, if it even exists. Hong Kong is not vast. 7 million people occupy a territory smaller than Greater London, most of them pressed into a narrow band of dense ground, crossing the same stations and the same streets at the same hours. You can travel end to end in under an hour. One expects that closeness to make a person easy to find. It does the opposite. In a place this compact, a person moving through the constant crowd is not hidden. They are simply one among millions, indistinguishable, absorbed. She did not disappear into emptiness. She disappeared into density. Privacy law slowed the rest. Phone records, personal data, none of it opens quickly. This time, something shifted the pace. Her phone records gave the first thread. Her last call had gone to a number belonging to Ding. The direction was clear. But the real break, the one that turned a missing person into a murder, came from elsewhere. On the night of the killing, while the body was still being taken apart, Ding telephoned a close friend, Yan, more than once. His voice was calm, something close to pleased. Through the line, beneath music and running water, he described what he was doing, how he had killed the girl, how he had taken her face, how he was working through bone. Yan assumed it was the drugs talking. People say things on drugs. You learn not to listen. Days later, he saw the missing person poster online. The quiet smile, the date, the place. Every detail matched what Ding had said into the phone. The cold arrived all at once, and complete. He did not sleep. The next day, he went to the police, his voice shaking, and reported his friend. That call was the hinge of everything. Ding was arrested. Forensic officers sealed Flat 2C. The air inside still held mold, blood, and disinfectant in one sickening braid. They dismantled the toilet. They lifted the bathroom tiles. They brought in drainage workers to open the manholes in the back alley. In the dark of the drains, gloved to the elbow, the officers searched the sludge. Under the torchlight, pale tissue surfaced from the waste. Over 2 days, they recovered more than 19 pieces of suspected human remains. Testing returned a single name: Wong Ka Mei. Her head and most of her torso were never found. From phone records to friend to drain, each link closed around him in turn, and the chain held. A missing person case had become a dismemberment murder that took the whole city with it. After his arrest, the case went to court. In 2009, a year on, it was heard at the High Court of Hong Kong. Ding admitted the killing and the dismemberment. He claimed the drugs had taken his mind, that it was manslaughter, not murder. What made the case difficult was the absence at its center. Mei's body was never fully recovered. Her head and most of her torso were never found. In Hong Kong, as elsewhere, murder without a body is hard to prove. The prosecution must establish beyond reasonable doubt not only that the person is dead, but that the accused made them so. Without a body, doubt has room to live. Many such cases collapse into it. This one did not. The prosecution answered with the evidence itself. 6 hours of work, organized, calm. He remembered which bus he took to dispose of her. A man who does not know what he is doing does not remember the bus route. The act showed full responsibility from beginning to end. Set beside his own detailed confessions, the blood and tissue in the flat and the drains, and the testimony of the friend he had telephoned mid-act, the case became overwhelming. The trial lasted 6 days. A jury of 4 men and 3 women returned a single word: guilty. The judge gave him life without parole for preventing the lawful burial of a body, 4 years to run concurrently. That is the legal end of it. But the story did not stop at the courtroom. While Ding awaited trial, his father was running between the prison, the courts, and his own work. He was already ill: diabetes, high blood pressure, and the weight of a son's arrest pressed on a body that could not carry it. In late August 2008, he collapsed and died. At the time, Ding was still in custody. He applied to the Correctional Services Department for permission to attend the funeral, and the he request was granted. Under escort, in handcuffs and shackles, he was taken to the parlor to pay his last respects. For a short while, the man who had taken a life was permitted to mourn one. That is the legal end of it. It is not the end of the question. The case is remembered not because a man killed a girl. Cities forget those. But because of what came after the killing. The calm, the method, the music, the bones folded into the food of strangers. It asks the thing we would rather not be asked: how little distance there is sometimes between an ordinary person and the worst thing a person can do. It also forced the city to look at two things it had preferred to leave in soft focus. One was compensated dating, the quiet economy of young bodies and older money that had been thickening in the shadows of the internet. The other was the strain inside cross-border families, the new immigrant mothers who arrived with hope, the children caught between two places, and the slow erosion of family life under economic pressure. For a while, after the bones in the market, both moved from the margins into the open. People began to ask what becomes of the young when money and loneliness meet too early, and what becomes of families stretched across borders and left to survive on their own. When the room goes quiet tonight, and the light seems a shade dimmer than before, that is normal. Some places only begin to exist once you know they are there. Sleep well. Gala will be here when you come back.